Yahaha! What's up, guys? I'm Youngster Skaymore, and Breath of the Wild 2 was just announced at E3 the other day, and for me that was the most exciting announcement of the show by far. Breath of the Wild is one of my most favorite games ever, so I'm so pumped that they're making a sequel to it. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what a lot of my hopes are for Breath of the Wild 2, in no particular order. And the first thing I want to talk about is a bigger story. Now, a lot of people don't really like the story in Breath of the Wild 1. I am not in that camp. I actually really enjoy Breath of the Wild story, except for the ending. I think the ending is really bad, so hopefully, since we are having a direct sequel, they can pay off on a lot of the stuff that should have gotten paid off on at the end of Breath of the Wild 1. But aside from that, I really want the story to be bigger in scope. While the first game's story is really good, I think it isn't that huge of a part of the game, and I think having a much broader story scope-wise could make the game a lot more interesting. It could keep you a lot more invested into the story of the game. And I think now that it's their second game like this, they may have learned a bit from the first and found easier ways to tell a story. Might have learned a lot, and might, because last time they did memories, and it was like, oh, we don't know what order you're going to do things, so we'll just have all these things that you can get whenever you want. And I think they may have learned and found even better ways to tell a story. So I think that will leave room for a bigger and better story, and hopefully, more complex as well. And then, of course, I would really like a better ending, because I think Breath of the Wild endings was not very good. So hopefully Breath of the Wild 2 has a much more satisfying ending for us. Now, this next hope is definitely one of my biggest hopes, maybe my biggest, and it is a brand new world. And in parentheses, I have brand new real world. And by that I mean, in Majora's Mask we had Termina, and I haven't played Majora's Mask, but just the idea of the new world being something like, because there's that whole theory that Link is dead in Majora's Mask, and I completely believe that. It makes perfect sense to me. But that kind of makes the world meaningless, the world of Termina, and it makes sense because a lot of the characters in Termina are just look exactly like characters from Ocarina of Time, and the moon's going to crash into Termina and blow up Termina, yet somehow Hyrule's not going to be harmed at all. So it's basically like a parallel. Even if Link's not dead, it's at least agreed upon that it's a parallel universe, some sort of thing. Which means that the stakes in that game don't matter to the original game. I don't want that. I want it to be a real world connected to the world that we have in Breath of the Wild, so that the stakes matter. That the stuff that affects this world is going to be affecting the world of Hyrule that we're used to from Breath of the Wild 1. And I think that's pretty likely, because if it is a new world, because we saw the castle rising, Hyrule Castle rising in the trailer, which means that either the game might take place in the same Hyrule, which we already have, which hopefully doesn't happen, but even if it doesn't, it's definitely still connected, because Hyrule Castle is definitely a part of the story, at least in some way. But now, the main focus of that hope is that it is a new world, right? I don't want us to be just revisiting the same map of Hyrule, but just different, because it's like a little bit in the future. I really don't think that would be the case. I don't know how they would do that, without it feeling really old and really stale and boring, because like that's the world we've already spent over 100 hours probably exploring in the last game. So if we're just supposed to explore it again, that wouldn't be very interesting. So I hope that for some story reason we are in a different world, maybe on the border of Hyrule, or not even that close to Hyrule. I don't know. Maybe we see that castle rising up. Maybe it's gonna sprout legs and walk away or something like that. I heard Arlo mention something like that in one of his videos about Breath of the Wild, and I thought that would be a really interesting idea, because we know that Hyrule Castle is definitely connected to the story, and that's probably where Link and Zelda are in the beginning of the game. So maybe the game starts there, but then for some reason we have to end up going somewhere else, and that could be one reason why. But who knows, really? I don't know what the reason would be. I just really hope this is a new world. Maybe a new kingdom, that would be really cool. But I really hope it's not Hyrule, because even if it was somehow like a different Hyrule and it was a completely different world map, but it was still somehow Hyrule, which wouldn't really be possible, even that would be a little bit less interesting to me, because we've already explored Hyrule in this style of game, with like the Rito and the Zora and the Goron. Like, I would love to go to a brand new kingdom or brand new world map that isn't hindered by any of Zelda's like traditions, I guess, that could have all new species and all this new stuff that exists in the same world as Hyrule but isn't Hyrule. It's near Hyrule, and it can still be connected to Hyrule in a lot of ways. Like maybe the Sheikah have been there and they have some technology there or something. There's some reason that it's connected to Hyrule but it isn't, and maybe you go to Hyrule for parts of the game, but I don't know, something like that. But definitely I want a brand new world map to explore. That is the ultimate thing of this hope, and that is what I really hope comes true. another hope I have is for more enemy variety. You know, Breath of the Wild is a great game, but it does have some flaws, and one of those flaws, in my opinion, is that at a certain point, combat just gets kind of, you know, like the same. And this actually ties into another hope, which is more incentive for combat, because no matter where you go in the world, you're just fighting the same enemies, you know? Bokoblins, Moblins, Lizalfos, stall versions of all those enemies. You got Keese, you got Hinox, and then you got those like bosses, and the bosses, like or mini bosses, I guess you could say, are really cool when you first see them, and then they're just the same all over the world. You know, you got Hinox all over the world, you got Lionel all over the world. So at a certain point, it feels like no matter where you explore, you're just finding the same enemies, and that really isn't that interesting after a certain point. Whenever I am exploring and I see, you know, one of the enemy camps, I a lot of times just don't even go to it because there's no point. And that ties into, like I said, the other thing, which is there's not really any incentive to fight them, because it's at the point, once you've already gotten a bunch of great weapons and materials and stuff, you don't really need to fight those enemies, because what are you going to get from them? Well, you'll get more like Bokoblin fangs and that sort of thing, but you've probably already got hundreds of those. And then you'll get like maybe a weapon or something in a chest, but you've already got a bunch of great weapons, and you'll probably use more good weapons fighting them than you will as a reward. So there isn't a lot of incentive once you get a certain amount far in the game. And combining that with you've already fought this type of enemy 100 times, doesn't really feel that interesting to fight them again. So hopefully there are a lot more enemy types, and hopefully a lot of those new enemy types really change the way that you have to fight, so you can't approach a lot of enemies the same. And hopefully there is more reason. Maybe like each enemy camp could have a collectible there. You know how there's like however many Korok seeds, there could be a new type of collectible where at each enemy camp has one of those collectibles, where the first time you fight that enemy camp, you will get that collectible for that enemy camp. And then if you fight that enemy camp again, you'll just get something else, you know? So that when you get to a new enemy camp, you won't be like, oh, I've seen this type of thing a million times. You'll be like, oh, I haven't been in this enemy camp yet, so I should fight it so I can get that new whatever. And I don't think I hope that it goes beyond that, but I think that is one good step to do. Just like from a progression standpoint, it gives you more incentive. But I hope also, just from a gameplay and fun standpoint, there is more variety in those situations, so that it's not just, oh, I want to fight this so I can get this new thing. It's, oh, this is a cool kind of new thing that I haven't really tried yet. This is at least different in some way from the last enemy camp that I fought. Or at least, even if there are still a lot that are similar, just having more enemies, more enemy types will make that a lot better, I think. But that kind of ties in with another hope, which is new runes. That's my next hope. I think that, you know, Breath of the Wild, there's only about, I mean, there's technically more because you got like the camera and the amiibo, and there's different types of bombs, but there's really about 4 runes. There's bombs, the ice one, magnesis, and stasis. And you can do a lot of different cool things with those, and I hope they all come back in Breath of the Wild 2, but I want a lot more runes, like hopefully at least 4 new runes, so you can have about double the amount, and the same amount like introduced as were introduced in the first game, but adding them with the first game will give double, maybe even more, maybe 5 new runes, maybe 6 new runes, because if you think about it, we only have a couple runes in the game, really, yet they allow for so much stuff we can do, puzzle solving wise, and just interacting with the world wise. So just adding like 5 more, I feel like would give so many more possibilities to how you can interact with the world that I think would be really, really cool. And I hope even outside of runes, there are even more new ways to interact with the world. You know, think about how Breath of the Wild introduced so many ways to interact with the world, like even just chopping down trees, or lighting stuff on fire, or attaching octo balloons to stuff to make them float. I think that hopefully Breath of the Wild 2 just goes crazy with it and keeps thinking of new ways to interact with the world and adds them in. I think that would be really cool. Another thing I would love to see is a more world variety. You know, this is kind of a common theme of my complaint with Breath of the Wild, is after you've played the game for like 60 hours, a lot of what you're doing seems to feel samey. And I know that's like kind of a unfair complaint to have, because like, yeah, after 60 hours, obviously, any game's going to feel samey. But it is, so like, that's not why I'm not saying it's like a bad game, because it's one of my favorite games ever. But I think that's just something that could be improved on, you know? Like, one of the reasons it took me about 2 years to beat the game is because when I first started playing the game, I was loving it. Got about 60 hours in, and at that point I started to feel like kind of stale, and I was like, I feel like I'm kind of doing the same things a lot over and over, so I stopped playing for a while, and then many months later I started playing again, played for another like 20-30 hours, and then stopped playing for a while, and that pattern kind of repeated for a while. until I eventually beat it, and now I'm playing it again. So I mean, I've still amassed about 150 hours. So obviously, like, sameness isn't really a problem with the game, but it's just something I think could be improved, because once you've explored a certain amount of the world, I feel like you've seen everything. You know, like, maybe obviously there are things you haven't seen, but there are only so many unique things in the world, and there are a lot of things that are just sort of the same, and a bunch of them. You know, like, there's only so many times I want to break these minerals to get the ore inside. There's only so many, like, mountains I want to just, like, climb to find a Koroxy at the top that are mostly the same. You know, so hopefully maybe maybe just more unique environments, like more places like Zora's Domain, more places like that are like, whoa, this place is so cool, unlike anything I've ever seen before. More places like the Yiga Clan hideout, that's, whoa, this is so cool. This is like, I don't even actually like the Yiga Clan hideout that much, but it's very unique, I guess, which is my point that I'm trying to say. But there's more places like that. Like, I don't want there to be as many places that are just pretty big areas that don't really have anything unique in them. I just think adding more unique places would be really cool. Like, you know, you'll go around and you'll see ruins, and you'll see the same types of ruins hundreds of times, yet you never see, like, so why are all those places ruins, yet there's not a single one that's still intact? Like, what were those ruins of? Like, castles or forts? Or it's just kind of weird that it seems a lot of it seems copy and paste. Like, there's these weird little, like, chariots that are like these broken down chariots that there's just hundreds of them all over the map. Like, what are those? Why is there not a single working actual chariot in the game? Yet there's 100 copy and paste ruins of chariots that are just kind of weird. Like, you know, that sort of thing is that you feel like you've seen a bunch of times. Less of that and more stuff that is unique and makes you feel like, well, I haven't been to this part of the world. Look at all this new type of stuff that I haven't seen yet. I haven't been here, but this sort of stuff that I'm seeing right here is the same as this sort of stuff that I saw halfway across the world, you know? And also just more civilization too. I think if we are going to a new world, that's a really good opportunity to have a lot of more civilization, because, you know, Hyrule, there was a calamity 100 years ago. We still haven't really recovered from that, so a lot of the stuff's in ruins. There's not a ton of civilization. The world's kind of in a bit of a bad state. But if we go to a new kingdom, maybe this kingdom has not been affected by calamity again at all, and it's thriving, and we could see civilization everywhere. That would be really cool, you know, see a lot more civilization and maybe new types of people, new species. I think that would be really awesome. Another thing I would love to see is payoffs from the first game. You know, like people. I want it to be like, if you played the first game, there'll be a lot of moments where you'll be like, oh, that's so cool. Like, maybe you'll see this character from a side quest who's like, yeah, I want to go try to do this. Then you'll see him 50 hours into the game in this other place. Like, yeah, man, I achieved my dream. I'm doing this. And this also ties into how Breath of the Wild 1 didn't have a very good ending. So hopefully this can be a little bit of a saving grace for that. Like, oh, maybe it didn't have a great ending, but we're going to pay off on a lot of that stuff that you wanted in the ending here. You know, like Link's relationship with Zelda, we can figure out more of that. I would really love to see people reacting to Link basically saving the world, like how they react to Link knowing that he has basically saved Zelda. And I want to see how civilization in Hyrule is starting to rebuild. I know I said I want the game not to take place in Hyrule, so hopefully that's a lot of something we could see maybe towards the beginning of the game. I think that would be really cool. One minor annoyance is when you're switching weapons, particularly late in the game when you have a lot of different weapons. It'll take a really long time to maybe start at the Master Sword, which is first in your inventory, and switching all the way to like a spear that you just got that's last in your inventory, and going back and forth like that can take some time. So if there was a more streamlined way to do that, that would be cool. Maybe you could have different categories for one-handed, two-handed spears, and elemental weapons, that sort of thing, so you didn't have to scroll all the way through. But at the same time, I don't really know how easy that would be or difficult to implement that, and the way they do it is already fine, so I wouldn't be like disappointed if that didn't get changed. But if there could be a more streamlined way to do it, that would be cool. One of my last hopes is a weird one, and it's just that it's not so similar to Breath of the Wild. And that's a really weird thing to say, because Breath of the Wild is an amazing game. So it's not like I want it to be like drastically different, but the thing is about Breath of the Wild is it was so revolutionary on one hand because it was amazing, but on the other hand because it was so unique and new. So if they just sort of made the same type of game and it's way too similar again, I don't think it would have that same effect. So I'm not saying I want it to be like a different formula or like a different type of game. Obviously I want it to be the same type of game, Breath of the Wild 2, but I want to make sure that I just really hope that they don't make it too similar, Because if it is just have sort of all the same mechanics, all the same runes, all the same stuff that you can find, and just a new map to do it, I think that would feel a little bit samey, and I don't think it would be as fun as having played through the first game already. So hopefully they do enough stuff to change up the game that it doesn't feel like you're just doing the same thing in a new place, that it does feel a bit different, in that way. But then the last hope I have is a little bit of a cop-out, but I hope it comes out in 2020, man. When we saw that, and it's like, it didn't give us a title, it didn't give us a logo, didn't even give us a year. It was just like, Breath of the Wild sequel is in development, and that makes me think this game is far off. It makes me think this game is 2021, that we're gonna not hear about it for a year, hear more about it at E3, and then they'll be like 2021, or maybe if we're lucky, like spring 2021. Hopefully that's not true. I'm really hoping it'll come out holiday 2020. Definitely possible. On one hand, I feel like they would have said 2020 if it was 2020, but on the other hand, it'd be a better announcement. Like if next year at E3 they say 2020, it would be like, oh yeah, it's coming this year, and that would be like a really great thing to hear. Whereas if they said it now, it wouldn't have as much hype behind it, because we already have all the excitement of just getting the game announced in the first place. So announcing it for 2020 next year at E3 would be really exciting, because then we're like, oh, it's less than 6 months away. And at the same time, I think it would be a good holiday game to have in 2020. And whereas it would be weird for it not to be a holiday game, kind of. So I wouldn't want it to be all the way in holiday 2021, which is so far away. I could see spring 2021, but I just feel like it would be a little bit weird to have this as a spring game, even though Breath of the Wild 1 was a spring, technically winter game, basically spring. But that's because it launched with the Switch. So that's a little bit different. I really do see this as a holiday game, so hopefully it is holiday 2020. I definitely think it's possible, but I really don't know. I think it could go either way. So hopefully it's sooner rather than later. Hopefully it didn't sound like I was bashing on Breath of the Wild in this video or anything. That's definitely not what I want it to sound like. Breath of the Wild is an amazing game, one of my favorite games that I've ever played. So in case it sounded like I was being negative, that's not what I meant. It's just, I was focusing on the negative elements of the game because I'm talking about the things that I want to be improved. I wasn't talking about the 95% of things that are already amazing, because those don't need to be improved in Breath of the Wild 2. So you know what I mean. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think, or not what you think. Let me know what you want Breath of the Wild 2 to be like, what your hopes are for that game. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys next time.